in your industry. My name is Aaron Brennan, the Director of Marketing here at Vipaar. And this week my guest is actually our CEO, which I'm really excited for. Since he just got back from Asia, he can tell us a little bit about his trip. And we'll talk about just sort of his background in the industry. Drew, thanks for joining us.
Aaron, thanks for having me on board.
Awesome. Well, you just got back from Asia. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing over there.
So we had our newest, largest customer put 4 sites live across Asia. So it spanned all the way from Korea down to Singapore with 2 other sites as well. So a fantastic trip. Learned a lot. I always enjoy the people the most in any trip. So met some exciting, fantastic people along the way. It was a surgeon presentation that sold during the first stop on the trip. And we just worked our way pretty much south.
That's awesome. That's very cool. So tell us a little bit about your background and what you've done before you kind of came over to Vipaar and the CEO.
So I like bringing new, helpful things to people, and that's real general, but I did that with 2 different companies prior to starting Vipaar. I joined with Ernst & Young right out of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Ernst & Young is a global consulting firm, so I work with primarily emerging and startup companies in the North Carolina area, and then some in Alabama. And watched as they grew, and they helped their customers. A lot of them were early stage or venture-backed or incredible products that they were taking to market. And so ultimately, I joined one of those exciting companies, a company called Deaton, based here in Birmingham. And it was a healthcare technology company. It is a healthcare technology company, part of a global Fortune, I don't know what, large company at this point. So both stints were 5 to 7 years each, and they were incredible runs with great teams, great talent.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So with your background in sort of healthcare, I do know that there is a need in a lot of companies that are sort of focusing on healthcare. Even Apple was discussing, there's rumors of them getting into the healthcare industry. Google came out with a contact lens that sort of regulates your diabetes, regulating diabetes and where your levels are at. What is your take on technology in the healthcare industry? Where is it going? What are its kind of hurdles that it has to go over?
We all worry about our own health, and we worry about the health of our loved ones. So it's probably top of mind if you have parents that might need care, or kids that may or might not need care, or you yourself are worried about my cholesterol too high, or is my activity enough? And so technology fits with all of those places. Personally, I think that preventive care, so things that can motivate me to run more or to work out a little bit more to kind of help me be in better shape, is my current place. Now, we all have seasons of life, and so with my parents, I want to make sure that they're getting the best specialist care. My grandmother, I want her to have constant monitoring. She is over 90 and in a facility where she needs active care. So technology can be used to actively monitor, to maintain, to visual eye on someone, med inspection, and then with the newborns, again, you have to have monitoring care. So there's all sorts of care. Now, you mentioned Apple and Google. I think it's good that they give tools for us to be able to use. We just need to know how to use them, keep using. Technology is great, but it can't be just technology for technology's sake. Like, to make it easy, make it useful for people just to come in and start using it. So ease of use is something we always think about too.
That's awesome. That's a great response, actually. So where do you think sort of the biggest jump and the biggest need for sort of technology is in healthcare? I know that healthcare sort of is a very broad term, so there's a lot of different variables and aspects you can go into. But where would you, if you had to pick one spot in sort of healthcare technology, where do you think that biggest group is?
So this is healthcare is very personal. So if you have a condition, you want that to be the area of highest growth. So if you have a heart condition or any particular a blood condition, you have to own that and want that to be the area of most rapid growth. Recently back from Asia and planning a trip to Europe in the next 3 weeks. it gives me the chance to say that what we appreciate as care in our world may be different than what others have as even an option of care around the world. So the disparity in care around the world is probably the greatest opportunity. The greatest opportunity is maybe not in the billion people that have the access to the most care, but the next 2, 3, 4 billion people that are going to soon have access to similar or near similar care. So how do you get that access to so many people who now, most of them are beginning to have access to the internet, beginning to have access to technology. So they're going to be able to research and figure out what the highest care that they can get for themselves and for their loved ones. So being able to open that market up probably is the greatest near-term opportunity. Now, individually in each specialty, there's always new advances. So you have to read the research and see what's going on. I'm not an expert in that.
Well, from your perspective, do you think there's a bigger growth in the hardware technology, or is there a bigger growth in software technology when it comes to healthcare?
Both advance. I think we agree with that.
Right.
Software is so quick though. I mean, I see what we're able to do with software in just weeks, days, months, and I see what the big players are able to do in software in relatively short order. Hardware takes a little bit longer because you have to engineer the hardware, you have to get the hardware made. Software, once it's made, you can push it out the next day. So software has a faster cycle to it. Now in healthcare, it's a mix because you can't build a piece of software to replace a bone in a leg or arm. That's a piece of hardware that's going to have to go in there. So in that respect, I think it's a mix. I would lean a little bit more towards software because it's faster, but recognize that our bodies are physical and we're going to need the hardware too. I don't see Iron Man here tomorrow.
Not yet.
No,
not yet.
Yeah.
But I hear there's a young man around Birmingham that's actually building an Iron Man suit. I actually talked to him like 2 weeks ago. It's fascinating.
Because I think that'd be a pretty interesting conversation. I might even sit in on that one.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. But yeah, you're right. We're far away from the Iron Man sort of game. Now, with healthcare, there's a very there's a stigma that they don't actually embrace technology or new trends or new ways of doing things also well. Do you think that's sort of a true statement? And if that's a true statement, what do you think is sort of the hiccup there?
I'm dying to just answer you yes or no on the question. I really am. I'm trying to answer like unequivocally yes or no.
I don't want you to just answer yes or no.
It just depends. So in the U.S., there's a series of regulations that protect consumers, and that's incredibly important. And so the stigma there is not really a stigma; it's just a protection. It's wanting to make sure that we in the U.S. provide that layer of protection to the consumer, and the FDA kind of leads that. So that's a fantastic safeguard. And the rest of the world has similar but very different regulations too. So there is a fear in some ways of running afoul of the regulations here in the United States. And it's very important to make sure to protect the consumer. In the rest of the world, they're trying to embrace it at different rates too. So I think that it really depends on where you are. It depends on the tolerance that people have for new technologies. In certain parts of Asia, it was amazing to see what they could do with the technology that they had. The bandwidth was more than we have available to us in lots of cities in the United States as well. So it's interesting. There's not a clear answer. A lot of it depends on where you are.
So you think it's more of a government-regulated thing that's sort of holding back adoption for maybe some people, or?
It's not that clear, not that simple. The government encourages such incredible adoption in the U.S. as well. There's all sorts of research programs sponsored by NSF, NIH, and many others to push research too. So that brings new technologies to market that the rest of the world can use and that would never exist otherwise. So it's a balance. It's not a clear story. I would love to see more clinical trials based in the U.S. I think that would be great for the country. And we're certainly doing our part of that here at Vipaar.
Yeah. So since you talked about Vipaar and what we're doing here, Talk a little bit about where you see Vipaar helping in the healthcare industry from your perspective, and then I'll ask you another question afterwards.
Okay.
That's not going to be healthcare related. So.
Good. So in healthcare, Vipaar, we certainly have a history of that with Dr. Guthrie as a co-founder and myself and our background in healthcare. There's many ways we can help. Certainly in the clinical education outside of the operating room, so that would be in the cadaver environment, that would be in the sawbones, in the teaching sessions with those that will ultimately use the technology maybe in the operating room. That's currently where we help with technologies to move into the operating room today. We don't do the technology in the operating room specifically in the United States. Now we also can help with equipment that is often in the operating room that needs maybe a question on how to run something, or a question on whether or not there needs to be repair or cord or placement or anything like that. We have a lot of capability to help companies that might have equipment in the OR.
Okay, I understand that. So as you talked about with Dr. Guthrie, who was our first guest, he sort of kicked off the healthcare thing and where we are. Where do you see Vipaar helping most that's not in healthcare? What industry?
Well, maintenance and repair globally is a $400 billion industry. So it's a huge industry. Now, that involves a lot of travel. And just getting back from a two-week trip to Asia and planning another week trip to Europe, travel takes a lot of time away from not only those you love, but those you work with and the projects that you're working on and the team. And so when you are having to fix things or repair things or maintain things on the spur of the moment with travel, even if it's just across town travel, it takes you out of your routine. So with Vipaar, we can help people be where they need to be to not only repair something that might be spur of the moment, but to maybe do an installation for your newest, best, next customer. So if you can be in both places, not literally, but virtually, you can cover the ground to take care of customer clients that take care of them.
Nice. Yeah, and so it could be a very cross-functional, cross-platform sort of thing, and that's where you see it going. So if you could add, one sort of addition to our new mobile-to-mobile app line, as you know, I'm really excited about that and pushing hard for that.
We could have a whole segment just on line.
And we might actually. I might just do a segment where I just sit here and talk with nobody watching about line. But if you could add something to it, what would be the one functionality that you would want to add to our software to make it helpful for either you or the people that you've talked to or worked with so far?
Yeah, so there's lots of things that I want to have available to it, but I want to keep it real easy too. So for ease of use, I want it to be a one-click send request to friend. I mean, that's my number one thing that I want. Now, we're in a private beta stage right now, so if we added that right now, I'm not sure how big our private beta would grow. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
It would be an interesting conundrum.
Exactly. It would be a good problem, but it'd be so as we add things, I think one thing that's important. I mean, we're going to add that for certain over time to line anyway, where it can record within the mobile-to-mobile session. That's something that we have on our base station functionality today. In addition to that, probably just speed. Speed to do everything. That minutes count, seconds count. So we just really like to add that speed too. Now we're going to have to trust the network providers to add the bandwidth around the world that we need. In certain cities, I can attest that I have plenty.
And other ones, not so much.
We're working. I'm sure they're working. They're all working.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So I'm going to actually kind of go away from Vipaar and what we do right now. I know you're a techie guy. I know you walk around with the Bluetooth thing around your neck.
I took it off.
And I'm glad you did, because you know how I feel about that thing. It's a little too intrusive, even for me, who's a tech guru and been in technology for 10 years. And I still don't like it. With launching glass, it's just, I don't know. It's just me.
Yeah.
Just weird, okay? So where would you see the biggest leap in technology that sort of helps an industry?
Battery life of mobile devices.
Yes, yes. So you do walk around with a battery.
I do have this large 11 amp battery
You
that
do.
just charges everything. Whatever you need.
So for you, what would be sort of the length of time that a battery would need to last in order for it to be, right now we're all aware that the battery life for cell phones, mobile devices, stuff like that is not where it needs to be. Where do you think it needs to be in order to be sort of custom to everybody's needs? Like, that's without saying like it needs to last forever without charging.
Yeah.
What do you think is a reasonable sort of?
So you remember when you made an assignment of BS in chemistry, it kind of a little bit of a math background in addition to the other things. So I would look at it as what is the life expectancy of the technology? So let's say the cell phone's a 2-year life, right? So you want the last third, of whatever life it is, to be able to get you the full 18 hours. Because if your average person sleeps 6, it means to be awake 18 with heavy use. Right. So assume that you're a heavy user and you want it to last 18 hours in the last third of its expected useful life. So whatever that works out to be. So for my phone, I would love for it to work 18 hours with heavy use. So that's, and not just do it day 1, but do it day 405. So everything kind of in that category.
So the next question I actually want to hop into it with you is an interesting one, and one that I have experience with, as you're sure, as you know, as I walk around with glass all day, is wearables, right? We're talking about battery life, and now we're sort of moving into this wearable technology. And there's a big thing about wearables not having a battery life. Do you think that is going to be a hindrance to the wearable technology taking off because the battery life just isn't there?
Good question. I don't know. I want to try it out. Like I don't wear a watch. I usually, I want to wear a watch much older than the one that I want to wear. So maybe I end up in finally I didn't know wearables soon. Certain wearables probably, because head-mounted things. So we have a little experience with head-mounted wearables. Right. If you wear a battery big enough on your head right now to support real-time video for 18 hours, it'd be better. Yeah. So that might be a specialty use or something that has a shorter term life, a replaceable battery, things like that. But like a watch or something else, you don't have to have a long battery life before it makes sense to adopt. But I think it's coming.
Yeah, I totally agree. So you're for wearables taking off?
Absolutely.
Changing the game?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we've done a little bit of work with Google Glass, obviously. Do you think Google Glass is something that sort of could take off in the healthcare industry? I know there's been a lot of press about it. I was even reading something this morning about somebody in Durham, a doctor at Duke, who was wearing glass.
Did you say Duke?
Duke. Yeah, I know, you're a UNC guy.
Okay, just checking.
I know. But he's at Duke, so maybe you could talk somebody at UNC to start wearing it and using Vipaar on the glass device. Do you think glass could really take off in the healthcare?
Absolutely. There's a hunger for it. We get approached regularly from people wanting our tech on glass. Now, I don't want to talk about Vipaar too much. So I think there's many applications for glass, and it has to do with the information displayed. If you can bring the information of the internet or specific sources or things that aren't on the internet, such as data, just data about patients, medical records, or technique, if you can get that to somebody just when they need it, that's when they need it. It's not, it's great to have the knowledge and study for the 10 years before that moment you need it, but if you could have it also available easy when you need it that moment, that's just really good. So absolutely. Now whether or not it will have the openness, and when the openness comes for all those apps on it.
Yeah, that is a very good
I won't
question.
ask you that question. How about that?
I'm not going to answer that question even if you ask me. You know the rules.
I do.
So great. I always end every episode, and you know this, and
How
everybody
you
watching
thinking about this one?
is, I have always admitted that my favorite technology was when I switched over to my iPhone, and all of a sudden I wasn't carrying my iPod, plus a smartphone, plus something else, and it just engulfed everything in one, and I know mobile is taking off, and it's huge. What is your favorite technology?
So I'm older than you. I've been thinking about this a little bit. Now, I'm going to go with phone, but I'm going to take the I out of it. And I'm just going to say the phone general. Because some of the earliest memories I have of my mom on the phone, talking to somebody, or my grandmother having her favorite seat that she had next to the phone, because remember they had cords back then.
Right.
So it's kind of, some people watching this have never seen a phone with a cord on it before, but she had to stay here, and it was in the hallway, so there was like a little table. And I just think about how that really connected the world. You know, we spend time on the phone all around the world, and that sharing audio back and forth, while it seems mundane today, we're definitely in the world of video, being able to share video and interaction around the world. I think the phone really not only moved information, but moved emotion. You could talk with family, and you could hear the joy in voices whenever you talk to a loved one that you hadn't seen a month or a day or a year. And that, I think that power is something that the phone still has.
So, from a technology aspect, and this is going to sound a little weird, because the phone growth has just doubled and tripled in the last 5 to 10 years, and what the phone can do. Do you think we're seeing a plateau in what the phone and
no, when you mean plateau in what it can do, or plateau in how many are out there?
And improvements in technology and what it can do? I mean, are we going to start seeing a slowdown in what mobile does in phones and technology?
I wish I knew. We all see improvements in each and every phone that comes out, right? So I mean, I can remember the first Motorola cell phone I had, and I can remember the BlackBerry phones that I had. I can remember the Android phones that I've had, and they're all better. Yeah. And there were some marketed huge increases in power in things that they can do. And I think there's a few more of those coming. Sometimes they're unexpected.
Yeah, I know.
I sort of remember the power of the first keyboard, like BlackBerry. That's pretty impressive. But then I remember how fantastic the full online experience was with the first keyboard. So I mean, they surprise us sometimes.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today. And before we kind of get out of here and shut this thing down, I'm going to ask you, how do people find us?
Lots of ways. Social media. So you find us on Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus. Follow us on LinkedIn as well. So Vipaar Media, Vipaar Plus, and then Twitter Vipaar as well. So I mean, just look us up that way, and then send us a message anytime.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next week.